welcome back to the Phantoms Fanatic YouTube channel. I am back with the second review this week, which is of Pearl, released this year in 2022, starring Mia Goth. Mia Goth. The same thing fucking happened with X. David Corenswet, Tandy Wright, Matthew Sunderland, Emma Jenkins Purro, and Emma Jenkins. Whatever that means. And it was directed by Ty West and co-written by Ty West and Mia Goth. Obviously, this movie is the prequel follow-up film to X, which I reviewed earlier this year. And the story of this film is that it follows one of the killers from X, Pearl, as she is in the 1918, I think it takes place, on her isolated farm, trapped in by her family and stuff like that. She realizes that she does not deserve this life, wants to be a star, but then realizes she has a dark, fucked up side to her, and then she kills people. Obviously, I really enjoyed X. I thought it was a very good horror movie with its themes of growing older and, you know, not making life what it means while you're young instead of older. And I really do think that this film, with its themes, really does carry a through line through with the characters, because obviously in the first movie, which I didn't realize this, Mia Goth plays Pearl and Maxine, the main character. So obviously those characters are supposed to be connected thematically and obviously from the fact that they're the two leads and the two most eccentric and developed characters in the feature. And especially with this one, you get a lot about Pearl. We learned a bit about Maxine and Pearl in X and how their two stories conflicted with each other in that film. We then get Pearl's backstory, and one thing that I really do like about this film is that it has thematic resonance with X, and I feel like it really makes a nice through line through it. Also, Mia Goth is fucking killing it in these movies. She has to play so many different characters that are somewhat similar, but very different. I definitely see how Pearl from X could definitely be this Pearl from Pearl. And one of my favorite things about this movie is that it's an amazing cinematography by Ty West. X was really dark, and that is fine. It was trying to go off of a more of a slashery route, and with what he was doing with that movie is he was trying to have darker scenes, which I didn't really... I've heard some people said it's hard to see, but it's not too bad, in my opinion, with X. This movie, he tries to capture the feeling of an early 20s Wizard of Oz feeling, where it's all the colors are so, like, blown out and looking like a Technicolor film from back then, and especially with the editing, you have, like, old-school transitional wipes, and the score is also very good at capturing that kind of stuff. It really does adapt the feeling of one of those films made today, which I really do fucking like about this movie. And it's a lot more of a psychological development dive into Pearl. I wouldn't say it's as scary as X. There's not as many horror scenes. There's more just an off sense of disturbing in this movie, especially with how it goes, how Mia Goth portrays the slow decline of Pearl and how she interacts with her family, and how she's like, I don't want a life that I don't deserve and stuff like that. And you really do see Mia Goth's acting chops in this as she goes from so many different sides of the spectrum. I will say, though, the other characters are relatively interesting. They're not the worst characters, it's just that I don't think they're as engaging as Pearl, but I don't think that was the point of this film. I feel like the point of the film was to add engagement and a through line with this whole trilogy that's now happening, because we're getting a sequel to this, Maxine, that'll dive into Maxine's future, and we will see the whole connectivity of X, Pearl, and Maxine, which is very creative, and I love that Ty West and A24 are doing this with a series, that they're carrying this theme of youth and making your life be the way you want it to be instead of growing too old and not being able to do the things you wanted to do or missed out on doing. I think that's such a creative use of this story to use a character's future, a character's present, a character's past, and all tell one consistent narrative and theme throughout them. I really do enjoy that. And as I said, this movie from an editing and cinematography standpoint is fucking amazing how it captures the feeling of a movie from 1920 or something like that. I really do enjoy that. And as I said, the other characters, while not as interesting, you do get enough from them, and they're there to interact with Pearl, which I didn't mind, because it dives more into her character. I will say, I have a few problems with this movie. Ty West is a very slow burn director, especially with X is a slow burn. There are some moments in this that did drag a bit. And I did feel like, okay, how long is this gonna go on for? I feel like the pacing of this movie is not as good as X. I feel like it felt longer than it was. This movie's shorter than X by a couple of minutes, and yet I felt like this was longer than X, which I feel like that is a bit of a problem when it's dragging in some areas. And as I said, the other characters are not as interesting or engaging, but the main focus of the film is on Pearl, the most interesting character, and it's more of a psychological dive into her. And the movie tries to go for a more offbeat, disturbing feel than just a straight-up horror like X did, or the sense of dread that X did. This movie just goes for like a slight tangent off of disturbing, and as the film goes on, it gets more and more fucked up as more things happen, which I really do think that is engaging, but some scenes I feel like drag on a bit too long, or it's too slow in some areas, and I feel like the payoff wasn't the best to where I feel like it was necessary to have all this build up. And not saying Mia Goth's acting is bad. There's a scene where she has like a 3-minute long uncut monologue. She is very fucking good in that monologue, don't get me wrong. But I was like, okay, how fucking long is this gonna last? That was my thought when I was fucking watching it. It's good acting, and for the most part, it keeps you engaged. But I will say, some scenes drag in this. Not all the characters are as engaging as they were in X, because most of the characters in X were likable. In this, I didn't really find that many of the other characters that engaging. Their acting is fine. I have no problem with their acting, and it does add to Pearl's idea that she gets these temptations and feelings of murder and stuff like that, which I really do think make a nice through line. I definitely recommend this film. It is a great theater watch from a cinematography, directing, and score standpoint. It really does capture the feeling of one of those movies from the 1920s, but modernizing it and keeping the through line theme from X. Horror has been killing it recently. The only one that I've seen that I have not liked is a movie that I will review at the beginning of next week. And also just a bit of news, I don't think I'll be able to get an episode of Meandering Conversations out next week because I am going camping, so I'll try to see if I can get one out later, but I'm gonna try to at least get the 2 reviews out as normally as I do. But, yeah. Horror has been killing it recently. I definitely recommend this one. It is a great theater watch. Even though some moments do drag on a bit, I feel like for the most part through the acting and cinematography and the whole through line through X, if you've seen it. And I will say, you don't need to see X before seeing this one. You can see this one before X, and the narrative completely works on its own. Obviously, since it's a prequel, some things do get ruined by the fact that you know how certain things are going to end up, but I feel like you know that going in if you've seen X. It works on both parts. You don't need to see X before seeing this, and you don't need to see Pearl before seeing X, or you know what I mean. It works that if you've seen X, this movie still does work very well, I will say. But But yeah, even though some of the characters are not the best and it drags in some moments, I still definitely recommend this one. It's a fun watch. It's very disturbing and a psychological dive into an interesting character, and I cannot wait for Maxine to see how Ty West and Mia Goth really handle this series as they go on to making these connectivity through Maxine, Pearl, and X to make such an interesting dive into things. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Please like and subscribe down below. If you want to share your thoughts on the review or the movie, I always like to see those. Make sure to share and favorite with people because I always like to see the growth of the channel. And yeah, see you next time.